Hi, friends. This is Sheryl from Tutoring with Sheryl, and I'm here tonight to talk to you about 5 ways or 5 reasons tutoring can actually help improve your child's reading ability. Now, the crazy thing about this is that I'm not actually going to provide you with like any tips and tricks about what tutors necessarily will specifically do. I'm going to highlight some things that tutors do. But before I get there, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what should you maybe be aware of in those teacher conversations that might come up during the school year that might be signaling to you that there could actually be a problem. Now, I know that we would all love to think there's not a problem, but there could be. And so let's start with some of those things that teachers might say that would cause you to be thinking, maybe I do have a problem on my hands after all. So one of the things that teachers sometimes will tell you in a meeting is that your child is having difficulty connecting the sounds with the letters. So they see the letters, maybe they know the letter, they don't know the sound. But I've even worked with students that didn't know the letters and they didn't know the sounds. So don't worry, it's all solvable. But if your child is past, let's say, kindergarten, and you're hearing that should be like this moment of, ooh, do I need to get help? Now, here's the thing that you can do with any of these things that I bring up. You can ask, can you tell me how you're helping my child? And then you can say, what can I do? You can give it some time. But honestly, and I'm just going to be brutally honest with you here, if your child is behind, do not ignore this, okay? Even if it's not in reading, if it's in math or they're in 3rd grade and their science is giving them problems, it's probably really a reading issue. Okay, so I that's my personal opinion. You can take it for what it's worth, but I just really feel like ask some questions of what's holding them back. So you're going to hear some things right now where we can go back to that science or social studies example and you'd be like, ooh, yeah, maybe that is a reading issue. So let's go to the second thing. They might be struggling with sight word recognition, sight words that they should really know by heart, like the, them, was, is, are. Many sight words are actually decodable, especially once your children really have a good grasp of phonics. So the question is, does your child really know the phonics rules? Yep, there's some rules there. Okay, what about vocabulary? Let's say that the teacher says, your child has a very limited vocabulary, and because they're struggling to understand the words, they really don't understand what they've read. And I have literally in my private practice and when I was teaching in the public schools, I would have students who could read all of the information. They were phenomenal readers. But if I asked them what they read, they might not be able to tell me what they read. So I'm just going to tell you that if you hear any of that, you should be like, ding, oh, I might need to either ask for some more help, ask what I can do, or get some help. Okay, all right. So let's keep going. If you hear the teacher say, your child's reading is choppy, it's word by word, and it's really holding them back because they're focusing more on the decoding rather than the meaning. Well, that's a fluency issue. Okay. So if our children aren't fluent readers and they're spending all of this energy trying to read the text in front of them, of course, they're not going to remember what they've read. This can also lead to accuracy errors, making frequent mistakes when they're reading, like substituting words, omitting words, inserting words that aren't actually there, can further impact their comprehension. Now, I'm just as guilty as the next person. I'm reading along and I might add a word or two because in my head, I think it's going to sound better. But if we have a struggling reader who's doing that, that might really mean that they're actually that's considered a mistake and it can eventually impact their comprehension. So if they're doing a lot of that, you want to talk to them about why they want to avoid that. Making them aware of it might help, but it really could come down to they're maybe more of a sight word reader and they're not really understanding what they've read. So they really do need to slow down, have a text that they can read and understand to practice those skills. Okay, something else that you might hear. You might hear the teacher say, your child is struggling to grasp the main idea. They can't follow the plot, and they really can't make inferences or predictions. Ring-a-ding-a-ding. All the bells and lights should be going off in your head. And here's why. Because that means that your child really is not understanding what they're reading. That text is too hard for them. And clearly, I don't want your child reading texts that aren't at grade level. But sometimes we need to back it up a little bit before we can move them forward. Now, that's not to say that your child is not going to be tested at grade level. They most certainly are. So you have to come up with a way to get them to grade level. And if you can't do it, you got to figure out how. And that's where tutoring can come in handy. All right, let's see if I've got two more. Let's say the teacher says, your child is a really good reader, but they can't remember what they read. That's a retention issue. Or maybe your child is just really lacking motivation. They don't like reading because they are frustrated, so they don't read. Well, that can be a problem too. Your child can actually have some underlying issues. Okay, there's three of them I'm going to talk about. If the teacher says something about phonological awareness, that's the difficulty of manipulating sounds in spoken language. It is a foundational skill for reading development. If they say something about that, you need to pay attention. If they tell you that your child has a processing challenge where they have difficulties processing information, maybe it's a visual issue or an auditory issue, it can really affect their reading fluency. And if your child has ADD or ADHD, that can also really cause problems while they're trying to concentrate and read. Okay, so those are some things that you might hear. Now, there are lots of things that you can ask for at school. You can ask questions like, tell me a little bit more about how you're going to address this in the classroom. There's nothing wrong with asking that. Tell me, what can I do at home to help my child be more successful? That's a great question. Now, if you ask it and they tell you and then they provide you with things to do, please do it. Please do it. Don't be one of those people who says, yeah, give me more, and then not do it, because the teachers are going to extra work to provide you with that information. So make sure that you follow through. But if you really don't feel equipped and the school really, your child doesn't qualify for a 504 plan, an SAT plan, student assistance team plan, this verbiage could change depending on where you're at and what time you watch this. So just know those words could change. Or if they have an IEP, then you might need to seek some outside help. I'm sorry, you just might. And if you can't do it, first of all, let's say this first. Go to a store or go online and see if there's some specific skills that they need to be working on. You could ask the teacher, and then you can buy some workbooks to take your child through that. But if that doesn't sound appealing to you and you're like, I really don't want my child sitting there doing more work, hire somebody to help you. I did it with my children. I mean, if they needed some extra help for something, I would hire somebody. Did I hire somebody for everything? Absolutely not. If I could help them myself, I did. But, one of my children needed some extra speech help, and I hired a professional to help because I knew that the help that they were getting at school was great, but it wasn't enough to move my child forward as fast as I wanted my child to be moved forward. And I didn't want my child to stay on the IEP for speech. So just please know that it's really important that you take the actions for your family, for your particular situation, for your child that make the most sense to you and that, of course, you can afford. But don't ignore it. I think that's really where I'm coming from. Do not ignore it. If they say your child is behind, do not just close your eyes and go, Don't do that. Terrible idea. You need to take action. Okay, now, how can tutoring help your child improve their reading, writing, or really, for that matter, any subject? The very first thing that I want you to know is that a tutor can personalize the attention just on your child. So all of that instruction is going to be personalized for your child. Think about them being in the classroom. They're in a classroom with many, many children. And now they're going to come and they're either going to be in a classroom where it's just, or maybe not even a classroom. Like I meet with my students online, just like I'm talking with you here, but it's one-to-one. So they have my full attention. And then if I do a small group, I have tried math groups with as many as 8 kids. That wasn't very successful for me. I won't go any higher than 4 kids in the group because I want your child to get the attention that they need specifically for themselves, not necessarily for the whole group, but for them. And so you have to keep your numbers small. 2 or 3 is ideal for a small group, especially if you want to move them forward quicker. But the best way to do it is one-on-one because there are no other distractions. However, there are a lot of benefits to small groups because they can see other kids making mistakes. And they're like, hey, it's okay to make a mistake. They can learn from other children, just like they can in the classroom. We don't want our children on an island by themselves. So you really have to pick and choose what works best for your child. Maybe your child's not motivated by showing up to a one-on-one tutoring session, but they might be really motivated to show up with their friend or another friend. Well, then create a small group. And there you go. All 2 or 3 of them can be advancing and getting the extra help that they need. Why not? Okay, let's go on. Now, we want to talk about the second thing. They can get a confidence boost. I cannot tell you how many parents have called me, emailed me, sent me a text, sent me a direct message and said, I cannot believe the parent-teacher conference that I just had with my child's teacher. They cannot believe how well my child is doing in school. And then they're like, whatever you're doing, it's working. Well, they know what I'm doing because they get a message from me at the end of every lesson that outlines everything that I did with their child. So of course, what I'm doing is working because I found out what the child needed to work on. And I did that by doing an initial assessment. And then I assess as I go along to make sure that, well, do I need to maybe make some changes in this plan? Are we still on target? And then when the parent comes and says, well, the teacher reported that they're doing really well in their reading, but their writing isn't so great, we spend more time on writing. Or, oh, they're doing really well in their reading and writing, but they're still struggling with word problems in math. Can you help them? Absolutely. Because that's what I'm trained to do. I'm a teacher, so I can do that. I've got the experiences and I've got the curriculums and I've got the tools to do it. And so really making sure that the kids feel successful and they get that confidence boost allows them to be confident in the classroom. Now, I was kind of also talking about the next thing, number 3, targeted strategies. I find what really works for that particular child. And then I also know the skill that they're supposed to be working on. So I make it work for the child so that they don't show up and go, oh, here I go again. That's not happening. They're very excited. We have a personal relationship. We talk about what just happened, like what happened the last few days since I saw you. How is school going? Let's talk about where were your struggles? What was the best thing? And then I don't always say, how is school going? Most of the time I say, tell me about your day. What was the best part of your day? And many times it is about school. But asking a child how school went when they struggled all day is probably not the best question to ask. So I really refrain from saying, how's school going? Sometimes I do ask it, but typically it's, hey, what have you been up to since the last time I saw you? Tell me a little bit more about that. And I think it's really important that my students in particular know that I have a vested interest in what they're doing outside of their time with me as well. Okay, we're going to keep moving on. We've got 2 more. Number 4, I really strive to make things fun and engaging for my students. Being at school all day can be fun, but it can also be very stressful. And most of my students, especially during the school year, because during the summer I move my hours to the morning, but during the school year, my hours are in the evening. And some of my students I'm seeing as late as 7 o'clock because that's when they're finally done with everything. So they've been to school, they went to camp, they came home, they had supper, and now they've got to work with me. And so I've got to really keep them engaged and make it fun and exciting so that I don't lose them. Okay, so that's what a tutor can do. They can make it fun and exciting. My students get a whole library. They can come in, they can practice anytime they want, and they've got a playground that they can come back to. So even if they're not currently working with me, they can go in and they can practice the skills even without me. And then the final thing that a tutor can do is they can help to improve study habits, study and learning habits. So something as simple as practicing those math flashcards, well, it can be done by a game. And then we can be practicing the skills for how do we come up with those answers. We can target vocabulary or decoding skills, or we can go in and we can learn how to take notes correctly, or how do we write correct sentences, how do we respond correctly to the teacher. That's even a study skill, because sometimes hearing that you're struggling all day and things aren't going so well, sometimes my students need to be told what's the right way to respond. So even though that's kind of a social thing, it's still a study skill, because if they're not getting along with their teacher, I can tell you it's directly impacting what they're doing in the classroom. Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground. I hope that this has been helpful to the parents who are looking for, like, what's this insight on tutoring? And it doesn't have to be in-person tutoring. My parents, as soon as they get a taste of online tutoring, they're like, wow, I don't have to drive anywhere. The tutor doesn't have to come into my home, and it's fun and exciting for my child. Now, I do realize that it's more screen time, but it's a person. So it's person to person. It's not just, oh, go play this game. My games, actually, the amount of time that my kids are on games is less than 5 minutes during the lesson. Sometimes it's only 2, but it's so motivating for them that they are working so hard to get through everything. And then if their parents allow them to go back into their playground and work, they certainly can. I hope that this has been really helpful for you. I was actually looking to see if I had my website here. Of course, there it is. This is my website. If you have any questions about tutoring and want to get a hold of me, this is where you go. Okay, that's all I have for you. I hope it was helpful. You guys make it a great day and keep the learning going.